And Steven! That's right, get excited. Today we're talking about Steven Universe. It's one of the sweetest damn shows that's ever been made. It's gonna make you feel things and inspire you, okay? Like, rude. And the big question on my mind is, did they accidentally create a bunch of polyamorous characters? Because it is a show about relationships, right? It is a very queer show. It is a very trans show. It is for the masks and femmes, the theys and the gays. The straights can come too if they want. But I'm a polyamory channel. I talk about relationships, and I really think there's something to dig into here. Let's see what we see. But first, hey, what's good? What's up? How you doing? I am Genevieve. I'm polyamorous for 13 years, and I do a lot of education, short and long form, on these places. I have a podcast called I Could Never. True stories of non-monogamy in practice. We're getting examples from all over the world. You can also check out my second YouTube channel, Chill Polyamory 2, TOO. That's where more of the question and answer and the education stuff is. But on this channel, we have fun, you guys. We need to have fun in these trying times, okay? Let's laugh it out, let's shake it out, let's talk some shit. So if you want more of that in your life, tell the algorithm so. Like, comment, subscribe, do all the things that tell our overlords I'm a channel worth watching. And let's get into it. And this is a good time to just give a blanket spoiler alert. Steven Universe follows Steven, a spunky young teen who is half human and half gem. And for the sake of simplicity, let's just say he's like the child of his human father and alien mother. I'm skipping over a little bit of lore, but like for our purposes, that's fine. He's their kid. Steven has special powers that he inherited from his mom, and the crystal gems take it upon themselves once his mom is gone to teach him what his powers are, help him control it, and then he joins forces with them to help basically protect the earth. The gems that we spend the most time with are Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl. Pearl is very poised and proper, very ballerina vibes. She follows the rules, she thinks that there is a good and a bad way to do things. She's very protective of her chosen family, she is incredibly loving. You get kind of the sense that she's a little repressed, that there's like a lot of yearning in Pearl without actually saying it out loud what she wants. Amethyst is a little bit of a wild card, she's a little chaotic and spontaneous and very hot, runs hot. Everything is id. Whatever she wants, she does. She doesn't even have to eat, but she'll eat, just for the sake of pleasure. So she and Pearl are a little bit opposites in that respect.
Eating food is so disgusting. You chew it into nasty mush. What a completely horrid experience.
Speak for yourself. I love it when mush passes through my body.
And then there is Garnet, who very much has like den mother vibes, I don't know if she's the official leader of the crystal gems, but she gives leadership vibes, right? She's composed, but not in a forcible way, in a very like Zen way. Very clear on what her values are, what she wants, what she is going to do. And Garnet is actually two separate gems combined into one. So now is when I tell you about fusion. So gemstones are not people, like they don't eat. They're alive for thousands of years, right? And technically it's not even their real bodies, right? Like the gemstone is its true form, and then they create a projection of a body that is the gem's vibe. And that is called fusion. It gets explained like this.
When we synchronize our forms, we can combine into a powerful fusion gem, an amalgam of our combined magical and physical attributes fused into a single entity.
So since the gems don't really have like a human body, that would be the dream, right? Having a body is terrible. But because they don't really have a fixed form, they're not like in a body, that means multiple gems can combine forces and create a new body. And how I view fusion is, since it is more than one personality coming together, more than one set of powers coming together, it is more than one being creating a new being. I see fusion as a relationship. So it's not always romantic relationships, but it is more than one person like working in sync. Like when we come together, this is what we're capable of. This is what the vibe is like. That is what the fused being is like. So I see it as the embodiment of a relationship. And so once I started seeing it like relationships, I started seeing 3 gems, 4 gems, 6 gems come together and create a new being. And I was like, We even see large groups, clusters of gems fused together.
Cluster! You were amazing! Are you okay? Do you want to go back in your bubble? Okay, take it easy.
Not me to another introvert after doing one thing outside. But yeah, if entire groups and clusters can come together, then it brings up the logical question, can polyamorous fusion happen? And the answer is explicitly yes. We meet a character, Fluorite, who seems to be a permanent fusion, right? She's not fusing for a reason or a short-term goal. She's just chilling, and she's a fusion of 6 gems.
Fluorite, how many gems are you now?
6. Maybe more if we meet the right gem.
We're open to a 7th. Now that's kind of all we learn about her. We don't really learn anything else about her character, whatever. She only exists to say that a lot of gems can be a permanent fusion in a romantically implied way. I mentioned this in my 25 years of polyamory in cartoons video. This was a fan theory. Is it polyamory? Is it romance? Are we imagining things? And when it was brought up at a Comic-Con panel to the show's creator, Rebecca Sugar, they confirmed that yes, it is polyamory. Now, I think the most unrealistic part is that 6 people would just be like perpetually in harmony without any conflict pulling apart the fusion, right? Like, I think that's like an optimistic view of polyamory. It feels very like polyamory written by well-meaning monogamous people. But hey, I'll take it, you know? And Fluorite is the whole reason I started looking into the show with this lens, is like, well, if she can exist, then what are all these other groups of fusions doing? Now, on the home world, gems have a very strict code of conduct when it comes to fusing. Gems can only fuse with their same type of gem, and often it is for like an approved purpose. For military operations, for example, we see 3 rubies come together, work together to become a bigger, stronger ruby to win in a battle, right? It is seen as abhorrent, improper to fuse with different kinds of gems. That's why when Ruby and Sapphire, 2 different kinds of gems, when they connect and fuse, it is a big deal. Different kind of gems are not supposed to mix. It is a scandal when they do. The gem homeworld is basically allergic to relationships outside the norm, just like that metaphor is allergic to subtlety, right? Because that ain't just queer-coded, that is a queer bullhorn. Ruby and Sapphire who fall for each other, who have to escape because they want to connect outside of the norm. When they fuse, they create Garnet. And like I said, Garnet is incredibly well adjusted and strong and capable. She is a healthy relationship incarnate. And Garnet says as much.
I embody Ruby and Sapphire's love. I'll always exist in them, even if I split apart.
She only comes apart, they only become individual, separate again, when they're in conflict or when they're not in sync. And it's not ambiguous that this is romantic love. The show even has like their song. There's a leitmotif that always plays when they're together in a really in a way that reinforces how significant they are to each other. And I was wondering, if Garnet, being 2 gems already, when she fuses with other gems, does that then make her polyamorous? I mean, we already know polyamory exists in this world. It's not so far-fetched. But the thing is, though, Garnet seems pretty clear on not wanting extra romantic partners. At one point, the mailman starts to swoon for Garnet and sends her a love letter asking her out, and she's like, no.
Nope.
Why not?
Garnet is already in a relationship.
Wait, really?
Well, yeah. She is a relationship.
Oh, so I guess this date with Jamie is out of the question.
3's a crowd.
So Garnet really feels like a queer, romantically monogamous duo. She does fuse with other gems. She does have other relationships, which is essentially Ruby and Sapphire having relationships as a duo, but they're not looking for another romantic partner. And of course, you don't need romance to have polyamory. Platonic partnerships, aromantic partnerships, they exist. But with Garnet specifically, the show does seem to keep kind of a clear line there that feels more monogamy coded to me. They even throw a cute little gay wedding for the 2 of them, which actually was pretty controversial behind the scenes. The network basically told the creators, look, if you're gonna do this wedding, we're gonna have to wrap up the show, right? We can't continue the show and have this gay ass wedding. And the creator said, okay, well then let's wrap up the show because we're doing the damn wedding. Now, Garnet being incredibly clear on what fusion is to her, what fusion is to Ruby and Sapphire, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what fusion is to everyone. And it doesn't mean that that's what romantic connection looks like for everyone, right? The show also gives us a really cute, sweet example of young, innocent, coming-of-age romance. Steven confused, and he confused with other humans because he's part human. He and his best friend Connie, there's a feeling of like a crush. Like he doesn't just like her, he likes her, you know? There's even an episode where they share the same juice box, and because they like sort of swap spit, the episode is called an indirect kiss. So that sort of thing is a sweet coming-of-age love or care, and the two of them are on the beach, and Connie is sort of lamenting that she's never danced with anyone before. And now remember, dancing for gems leads to fusion. When the two of them fuse, kind of accidentally, they suddenly form Stevonnie. And nobody knew Steven could fuse. He didn't even know that himself, right? So this is the first time it's surprising him, it's surprising the crystal gems. And the reactions of the gems tell me a lot about how they feel about fusing, right?
It's impossible! Or at the very least, inappropriate.
Pearl said it's inappropriate. Vibes of you're too young for that, you know? Meanwhile, Garnet got a huge dumb grin about it. And so it was cool to see sort of like when parents disagree or they have a different idea of like how a kid should come of age. But we know Garnet's history of sort of accidental, unprecedented fusion of love, right? Like, and so we just see her kind of heartwarmed by the situation, right? And so there's like fan theories of like fusion is always romantic love, but that wouldn't really make sense because like, for example, at one point, Steven fuses with his own father. So that either destroys your theory or y'all are a bunch of weirdos that need to go straight to jail. Just kidding, I'm an abolitionist. But yeah, to see it as only romantic love would be doing a lot of cherry picking. Anyone who describes a relationship, that's what a relationship means to them. And I wouldn't take one explanation as the universal explanation for all people everywhere all the time.
Listen to me. You are not two people, and you are not one person. You are an experience. Make sure you're a good experience.
So in a similar vein to people thinking that fusion is always romance, another fan theory is that fusion is sex. And I'm like, no, that's inappropriate, right? Like, because this is a child, but still, you know, I think there is like some intimacy. I think there's vulnerability. I think there's a deep closeness that is possible. So to say it's always sexual, I think is kind of reducing what intimacy even means. Like, they can absolutely feel vulnerable and close and intense and loving, and it doesn't have anything to do with sex, you know? Plus, let's not forget that sometimes fusion is literally just for a task. But also, fusion's not binary, right? Like, it's not either romantic love or practical strategy. It's a relationship, and relationships can look a lot of ways. Some of them have some fluidity of not really fitting into any boxes.
I think I need a little chat.
Oh, Steven, we only fuse for deadly situations. Does this look like a deadly situation? Ow!
Pearl, she treats fusion with a lot of weight. Sometimes people are fusing very casually, not for Pearl. She doesn't say fusion has to be deep or romantic, but it does have to be important. Like when Amethyst and Garnet are dancing, and it's not romantic, we have no reason to believe it would be like sexual, but when young Steven is watching, Pearl comes and covers his eyes. There's something very private, there's something very intimate about fusion to Pearl, at least. And being someone who was raised with like a lot of conservative Christian messaging, you know, and like that you should wait till marriage and then till death do you part, right? Like that is the vibe that at least I'm picking up from Pearl, of just like almost a fear of fusion, feeling like fusion should not be taken lightly. And that's not usually how platonic relationships happen on screen, you know? Normally we see characters are either in a friend box or in a crush or partner box. The friend box is supposed to be less strong, less committed, quote unquote, just friends. But platonic intimacy can absolutely have commitment and depth. There can be competition, there can be jealousy. So despite Pearl shielding Steven's eyes, Garnet and Amethyst do fuse in front of him to form Sugilite. They have a lot of strength and brawn and kind of some volatility and unpredictability. Like they can go kind of mad, but they're incredibly physically powerful. And Steven is so taken by their physical strength. And Pearl's over here like, I don't have that.
And can't you see that she's out of control and overzealous? I'm telling you for your own good and not because I'm...
And we see Pearl get not jealous, apparently. She's concerned, right? And that's just so real, right? When you see two people, well, in this case, three people, who are bonding in a certain way, their relationship does a certain thing, and you're like, I'm not invited, or I can't do that, right? And so all of that to say that fusion can feel very close and intimate. Maybe it's a very close friendship. Maybe they're fusing so they can achieve a certain thing. They wanted to be extra strong, so they fused, right? It was actually like kind of more on the pragmatic end, but they're incredibly close. They vibe really well, and there can be gems who feel left out or feel like, why isn't that me? Which brings us to Steven's dad, Greg. He's a human who fell in love with a gem, Rose, Steven's mom, and there's an ache there that he can't fuse with her the way that gems can with each other. So Steven is a special case because he's part human, he can fuse with humans, but I don't believe that 100% gems, I don't believe that gems can fuse with humans.
Fusion is the ultimate connection between gems, and you are not a gem.
And this is another case where we see Pearl really longing and feeling jealous. It's very queer friendship, but I want you and I don't know what to do about it vibes, right? The sapphic longing, it hurts. It hurts to watch it. Why are you doing this to me? And since Rose and Greg can't fuse, Pearl is like, oh, well, I'm better than you then. And she comes in and she spontaneously fuses with Rose in front of Greg, kind of at Greg. We have a special connection that you don't, it's kind of shitty. And if you remember, Pearl said you should only fuse in life or death situations. So either she was lying or that's how intense she feels about Rose falling for Greg. So yeah, she's being territorial and she's using fusing to assert her power over Greg, her superiority over Greg.
You're just a phase. You know that, right? You're a novelty at best.
And Greg gets really insecure. How could he not? He tries to fuse with Rose and it doesn't work. And he's like, maybe this is stupid. Maybe I can't do this. The thing is, Rose falls for Greg anyway. Rose and Greg dance. They talk all night. They fall for each other. And Garnet and Amethyst kind of say they're fusing right now.
Why are they still dancing? It didn't work.
Yes, it did.
What?
It worked.
I think this one's my favorite.
Amethyst even says it's her favorite fusion. So the show set up a rule, a hard rule that fusion, that a relationship with a gem, it can only look a certain way. And then they had a queer character be quite rigid about that rule, even use that rule as a weapon against humans, right? Which is why it's that much more powerful that the show breaks its own rule, that fusion actually can look different than we've been taught it has to look, and that looking different does not make it less valuable. And I see it as almost like an inspiration of when we're challenging what relationships should look like, right? The way that they challenge the broader world of Gem World, our relationships are going to look different. And that's what a lot of queer folk do or polyamorous folk do, right? But in making our own new kinds of relationships, we can set up rigid rules. We can make boxes for people. We can say this is right and this is wrong, and kind of sometimes recreate the kind of rigidity and militance that the broader society did to us anyway, right? And kind of make a new version of that. And so when Pearl upholds a norm in a rigid way, we're seeing that in action. Are we willing to challenge that too? Are we willing to break that down and not repeat what has been done to us? Because when Pearl's fearful impulses do go unchecked, that's when she starts to hurt the gems and the people that she cares about the most. At one point we see her really wanting to fuse with Garnet, and she's excited for that experience, but instead of asking for that, instead of being up front, she starts scheming and setting up scenarios where they have to fuse. She manipulates the world and creates drama and problems. And then Garnet is like, I guess we have to combine because this problem needs our set of skills. And so Garnet is just going along with it, and not understanding that Pearl is causing the problem so that this can happen. And once that comes out, she feels incredibly betrayed. And so it's interesting because yes, they were fusing for battle purposes, right? They were like, we need this particular fusion to win this battle. But it feels incredibly intimate to them as well. It's almost as if Pearl was tricking Garnet into intimacy. It's so disruptive. It's such a big betrayal that Garnet needs to go for a bit. She goes on a road trip. She needs some time away. And it's so upsetting to her that Garnet actually rips apart. Ruby and Sapphire aren't in sync anymore. They want to deal with the problem in different ways, fire and ice. But once they get more regulated, once they kind of find common ground again, they reunite to form Garnet and then go back to talk with Pearl. And sometimes we gotta go get regulated, we gotta go get support, If we were to try to deal with it right away before we like digested it, maybe we would regret what we did. So just like seeing that, because it's like modeling something that I think could be helpful, you know, in our world. And when Pearl and Garnet finally come back together and talk, we kind of get a look at the inner world of Pearl.
I'm just a pearl. I'm useless on my own. When we fuse, I can feel what it's like to be you, confident and secure and complete. You're the perfect relationship. You're always together. I wanted to be a part of that.
Like Pearl doesn't feel okay on her own. She kind of doesn't feel confident when she's not in a relationship, platonic or otherwise, you know? So she's longing to be included. She's longing to be chosen, which is a pretty familiar pain that she had with Rose Quartz.
I knew how you felt about Rose, and I stayed anyway.
That wasn't the problem.
Then what was?
She fell in love with you.
And Pearl didn't feel chosen by Rose because Rose kind of prioritized Greg or chose Greg to be the romantic and sensual partner. And so because that's not feeling settled, that's not feeling resolved, she's like recreating it and like wanting to be chosen by other people and wanting to force a situation where she's on top, you know? But when her lies and deception get called out, she does finally soften, she does get real, she gets the intimacy she's craving, you know, when she stopped trying to force things. And for Garnet, Pearl's realness, her vulnerability, that helped soothe things a little. So Garnet didn't have to trust her again, but she was willing to try. And I think that's such an awesome model of like the arc of a major conflict, the arc of a major betrayal and restoring trust, you know, is like, they just showed it. That's what that was, you know? Like, do that, model that. Like, that is so rad. That is also so practically useful, you know? And really touching how it was resolved. But seeing Pearl trick Garnet into fusing, it kind of got the gears going of like, are there cases of fusing where consent is an issue? Now, I'm not gonna, you know, paint a picture or anything, but if you don't wanna like hear about maybe the dark sides of relationships, then you can skip to this time code because, you know, we can also keep it light, but I can't not talk about it.
Why would you want to be here? What do you ever?
At one point, while visiting an abandoned gem facility, Steven and Garnet encounter monstrous amalgams of disembodied gems. They are broken shards who have been forced against their will to merge and to become something that is awful and putrid. Garnet is so horrified and disgusted, and she really reacts to this like, you might to torture, you might to essay, you know? And the disturbing nature of that shows how important fusion is to be freely chosen, and that it can be beautiful when it's freely chosen, but if it's forced upon you, it can be a nightmare. And the show does give us an example of an abusive fusion, Jasper and Lapis. So Jasper's a bad guy who actually was imprisoning all of the crystal gems and was imprisoning Lapis. They all escaped, and the crystal gems were fighting Jasper and beating Jasper, and Jasper is like, okay, I gotta be stronger. Hey, Lapis, why don't you and I team up, right? Then together our fusion will make us stronger. And Lapis gets to thinking, if I fuse with Jasper, then I can trap them down in the ocean so that they can't like do more evil to people. So agrees to fuse. They both consent to fusing, but is messed up. What both of them want to do is really messed up. So they fuse, they become Malachite, and Malachite gets dragged into the ocean to be imprisoned, right? Goes from jailer to prisoner up to jailer and prisoner. They switch roles and it's messed up. They both agreed to do this and it's awful. They're not major characters, but we do see updates of them over the course of the seasons. And what really tugs at your heart, what's really rough to watch because it's like pretty heavy-handed DV. Malachite breaks up, Jasper and Lapis separate, Jasper escapes. Lapis finds the crystal gems and like needs to come back to themselves. But before long, we see the boat that they're on get trapped, get stopped, and Jasper climbs on board. And Jasper literally gets on one knee as if to propose and says, let's fuse again. You know, let's join forces again. And it is tempting.
I miss her. We were fused for so long.
That is so real, right? It is really hard to break an abusive relationship. And so Lapis almost gets sucked back in and then like snaps out of it and is like, no, I'm not doing this. And good for her, like that's cool, that's empowering. I'm glad that it ended that way. It was kind of a wild ride to be on. If you've ever experienced an abusive relationship, you'll be like, And so the show gives us an example of when fusion is bad for you, of when a relationship is bad for you.
Meet her other friend. So, Andy, we heard you like marriage, so we thought, why don't we all marry each other?
Ta-da!
So in all of these complex relationships that mix and match, am I seeing this whole world as kind of a polycule? The answer is no. I don't see polyamory consistently everywhere. I don't think just because you have a close bond that you would consider that to be like a partner, sometimes, but not all the time. But what I do see here, stay with me, I see relationship anarchy. And if that's a new term for you, RA, relationship anarchy, essentially is saying no norms, no shoulds, no musts. We are rejecting the boxes of it all. We are saying that we are going to decide what we do, and it can come and go, and it might not even have a label, but we are the ones deciding it. The external society is not imposing, traditions or expectations on us. No, we are designing it. The friends that we have, or other partners, if you're polyamorous, they cannot change a relationship they're not in. We are anti-hierarchy in our relationships. So we don't have anyone ruling over us. And that includes scared people like Pearl. If she were to try to influence and change a relationship, that would not be cool. It's depicted as not being cool, A character might control or manipulate their partner and writers act like it's romantic. That don't happen in Steven Universe. The writers aren't trying to reward characters who double down on norms or enforce their will on others or step over each other for hierarchy. And because the show doesn't excuse Pearl's behavior, doesn't treat it like a normal part of love, I think that's why a lot of Steven Universe fans actually can't stand Pearl or struggle to empathize with Pearl. Now, I personally think there's a lot we can learn from Pearl because what she did, a lot of us are capable of doing if we get scared or desperate enough. Be real, be so for real, right? And so to understand her is to understand that scared part of ourselves, and to treat her with compassion is to treat that part of ourselves with compassion. And what she did wasn't okay. We can hold both these at the same time, right? So I'm glad that other characters pushed her to change and didn't budge on their autonomy. I'm glad that other characters didn't buy into Pearl wanting to rank people. Because if this is a metaphor for relationship anarchy, that framing would track. In RA, we do not rank people. We don't even rank types of love. We don't try to put romantic love above platonic or familial love. We try to treat all forms of relating as equally valid, equally worth our time, even if they don't look identical. And sometimes people get it twisted and they think anarchy means everybody all gets the exact same type of relationship. And I'm like, that ain't real. That's not how we relate to people, right? But it does mean we try to break down all the shoulds, musts, and traditions, that we don't try to put someone in a power position over other people. And crucially, relationship anarchy is not always polyamory. Relationship anarchists can be monogamous, right? It just matters if it's freely chosen monogamy versus socially imposed. Like with Garnet, it really feels freely chosen. It really feels like this is just organically the only person I want romance with, no thanks to any other romantic partners, right? It feels freely chosen, and that can be present in relationship anarchy. But there's also fluidity, like with Garnet and Amethyst, they're friends, they live together, and then when they fuse, it's very passionate and intense, and they go crazy together, and it's not sensual, but it is deep, it is significant. And then when they stop fusing, they kind of go back to a stasis. I see myself in that, right? With friendships that can be just like chill, maybe we even go months without talking, and then when I see them again, we have some sort of passionate fling and a lot of intensity. And then we go back to normal, right? And there is that ability for a relationship to do whatever it's gonna do, right? It doesn't have to go in some sort of direction. It doesn't have to look a certain way. Nobody outside of the fusing is telling them how it should look. Relationship anarchy. And that sort of thing is so rare to see on screen, and they found a way to show it. And I'm glad that the show made Pearl three-dimensional. They gave her a character arc. They showed that she could grow. I really see almost a utopian ideal of the freedom and flexibility of how relationships can look, you know? That is how I strive to live personally, because I practice relationship anarchy. So it's tricky to try to explain RA in a nutshell. If you want more like info and education and like deeper dives on that, I have a bunch of resources on my Patreon. But really, if you are just questioning any kinds of norms, any kinds of standards, if you are trying to carve your own path and find what feels right for you, what feels empowering, what kind of relationships feel like they flow, I would love to hear what you think, you know? I would love to hear what your experience is in trying to build your own thing from scratch, you know? So that's what I have to say about that. If you made it this far, thank you so much. Hit like, drop a comment, because those things really help a tiny channel trying to grow, and let me know what else you would like me to talk about. I hope you have a beautiful day. Bye.